name is Jack, and I'm going to talk to you today about building cornhole boards, game boards. This is my first attempt. I've never played cornhole before, but it seems to be quite popular. I've done quite a bit of carpentry work, but I'm certainly not considered a finished carpenter. And I have discovered a few things as I was doing this that might make it easier for a novice like myself to accomplish some of the tougher parts of what I would consider tougher parts of an average person trying to build a project like this. So first of all, I'd like to talk a bit about how I built the frame. First of all, I did two different processes. I have one board over there completed. This is the last one that I just completed here. Obviously not painted yet. And I went to Menards and bought two pre-cut boards, top boards. This is 1/2-inch plywood here. Two of them, 1/2-inch plywood, cut to 2 feet by 4 feet, which is the size that a game board is supposed to be. And I thought, well, the boards are boards. They're not perfect. It's not like working with precision metal products and that sort of thing. So I thought, what I've got to do is make my frame fit the board. I can't make the board fit the frame. So the way I did this was to start out by attaching my first two end boards. Cut them same exact size as the plywood. Well, actually, before I did that, I cut the holes in there because the whole 6-inch holes, and I did that with a jigsaw. Obviously, I didn't want to wait till I got everything put together and then cut the holes and have to redo a part of it. So I got that done, and then I thought, well, okay, I'm going to start out with these end pieces here. I cut them. By the way, these are 4-inch by 1-inch pine boards, decent quality pine boards. And I cut this one to fit this end of the plywood. Didn't worry about anything else, just cut this board so it's 2 feet long, same as the plywood. And then I took that, I glued that board down and did the same thing on this end. So over here, these boards are flush with the edge of the plywood, and they're glued down with Titebond glue. After it set up for a while, I tipped them over, and I used a brad gun or a nail gun. If you have an air compressor, these are great. If you don't have an air compressor, you can get an electric one. I have a relatively old air compressor, but it's fine for these. I used 1 3/4 brads on this, and now keep in mind I only have these two end boards on at this point in time. Because the glue it's set now, I flopped it over and I nailed those down with the brads all the way across each one of the boards from the bottom, with the thing turned over. Then I came back and I thought, okay, now again, we're dealing with a piece of plywood that was cut up at the store. So I then now had those boards standing up. They're attached quite solidly. Then I measured my 4-foot boards, which now don't need to be 4 feet. And I actually cut each board individually to fit in between these two boards. And at that point, I glued these down, glued them in the ends, and set the board in here and made sure that it stayed right along the edge of the plywood here. Each one separately, because there could be a little difference in them. It's not, we're not building a space shuttle here. So, got that done, and got those glued in, and then I took my handy dandy little brad gun again, and I just nailed 2 brads in the ends here to hold that in place. Okay, now I've got all 4 of my boards on. They're glued along here and back here, They're stapled on the ends is all, but that's enough to hold them in place. So I turned those over and came back down with my brad gun. Well, you can visualize that, and put the brads in, inch and 3/4 brads from the top down. They leave almost no evidence that they're even in there, so you can putty them if you want to, but the paint primer and the paint will fill them in it. So now I've got my box with 4 sides on it, perfectly fit to the plywood, because if the plywood varies a little bit, you have an option to move that around in the center here when before you nail them down from the top while the glue is still setting. But I had the brads on each end that are holding them in place. Then I decided, because I'm not using 2x4s, I would put one more reinforcement board in the middle, and I did that basically just like I did the other ones. So when I got done, I was very, very happy with the fit that I had here. Then I came around to the ends here, and I put 2-inch, number 8 2-inch exterior screws, deck screws, and I did that. The way I did that is I drilled a pilot hole first, a bit smaller than the drill, a bit smaller than the screw, so I didn't want to split the boards and that sort of thing. And then, you can buy a countersunk bit. I wanted the screw heads in far enough so I could put some filler over it. Not wanting to spend the extra money for a bit, what I do, I've done this trick a lot of times before, I just take a bit that's bigger than the head, and by hand, put a glove on so you don't cut your hands with the bit edges. I just take a couple of turns by hand and cut a big enough recess in there for the screw head to go in. Then I put 2 screws in here, countersunk them. They're in far enough so I could put some wood filler over them and finish them right up. I did the same thing in the center. I have brads here in the center holding it from the ends, but I also put a screw in there. Same thing on these ends. And I'm very happy with the fit on that. It's like I said, it's not precision work, so it's not a big deal. You're not going to have, if it's off a little bit as you're trying to. My problem was keeping the alignment on the sideboards here with the edge of the wood. And this way, you're just doing one board at a time and fitting each board to the slot. I didn't try to mass produce the boards or anything. I guess if I was building them for a living and had a cabinet shop and that sort of thing, it might be different. But whenever you're dealing with pine boards and plywood, and especially today's quality of wood, you're going to have some warpage and you're going to have to pull things together. So this worked good for me, that part. Okay, now the other part that everybody seems to have a problem with, and by the way, you can probably see that the board I've got under here already has some holes cut in. That's where I practiced cutting my 6-inch holes before I got into the real thing. The other thing that people seem to have a problem with is getting the angle on the legs correctly. So they're setting flat. When this end, you have to visualize this turned over, but when this is setting up, it's 12 inches from the edge of the plywood to where it sits on the ground. And that's the official dimension. What the angle is on this or whatever is kind of up to you. You can put the legs anywhere as long as you do the same thing on all of them. I just picked the spots and made one leg for a pattern and then cut the rest of them the same as that was. But what I did is, it seemed like everybody seems to have a problem getting this angle right. So I thought, rather than having it turned over the way it's supposed to be and hold it, some folks set it off the edge of the bench and then scribe a line along it. I decided to do it in reverse, and it kind of made sense to me. First of all, I made sure that the surface I have got this on is level. You'll see why I want to make sure it's level to make that happen. And so this piece of board that's under here, I shimmed up a bit and it's level. This is an old picnic table that probably isn't really level, but the board itself is level. So I thought, okay, if I'm gonna have to have this end 12 inches off the ground, the board here is already 4 inches, so I need 8 inches, an 8-inch measurement, which happens to be a gallon paint can. Okay, now, if you can visualize this, I don't know if you can see it there or not, I put my gallon paint can on the back side of this, right out on the edge. So I now have from this point over here down to the board, the surface is 12 inches. Okay, now you're maybe saying, what in the world is he trying to do here? But think, rather than trying to get the thing turned over, find a level spot, describe a line and whatever, I thought, okay, now what should this be? This should be level, right? If I've got everything level here. So I put my level on there, and sure enough, I have a level surface here, and I just measured down from here 12 inches, put a mark on there and scribed the line across there, and cut it. It worked, so I made 3 more and they all worked. Made sense to me, but anyway, that's kind of an easy way to do it. So I think that, you know, at least it's where you can get at everything and work at it. And the rest of the stuff, each one of these legs, they're not where I'm going to leave them now. The other thing I did, rather than just having just a nut on the carriage bolt here, I do have locking nuts, so I haven't put them on yet because I've got to take everything off and paint it. But those are the 2 hints I think that, for me, really made the process a lot simpler and a lot faster. I mean, I've looked at a lot of things on YouTube, people that have done these boards, and you know, some of them are really great. I mean, they're wrapping them in vinyl decals and things like that. Well, we're just going to put a couple, 3 coats of paint on this and maybe a little design on the front side of them and see how it goes from there. But anyway, that's how I did this, and I think it's going to work okay. If you set them on the floor now, these feet are down on the floor in level, and this edge, if you just flip it over, the back edge of the board over here is 12 inches off the ground. I think those are the 2 objectives that you need to have, and they need to end up being 2 feet by 4 feet. This whole center is down, I think, 9 inches. Basically, what I did for this hole is just, I just took a piece of plastic and put 2 holes in this strip of plastic 3 inches apart. My spot in the center here where I needed to have the center of the hole, which was centered across to this direction and down, I think 9 inches from the top. The specs are on 10 dozen places, probably on YouTube. I just put a screw in there through one of the holes in this piece of plastic, and out here I had another hole that was 3 inches, and took my felt tip and made one shot around with that and then took a jigsaw, cut the holes out. I'd recommend when you're doing that work with a jigsaw, if you don't have bandsaws and a lot of great equipment, especially when you make the smaller radius for the back. I also cut a radius on the back of the legs so that when you slide it down, they don't get tangled up in here. And when you're doing that with your jigsaw, I would, especially for the smaller radius, I'd recommend that you get a fairly skinny blade for it, because sometimes it's hard to make the corner and follow the line. So those are the things that I did. We're gonna now start putting some primer on this, and then we're gonna decide on a color and maybe some kind of a pattern or something like that. But anyway, it seems to work out pretty well. So if that helps you any, I think it's great that you're watching this video. And you know, I don't do a lot of videos. I do some drone videos too in my name for my videos, so I could maybe have 12 watchers instead of 10, is Lester Drones On. So anyway, this is my take on building cornhole boards the easy way.